Whatever happened to desktop PCs? All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Set your PC clock back to 1990.
Windows in a trench coat.
Game over, Zendaya.
All these stories and a whole lot more coming up on today's show. Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech. Hello, Dave, and hello, Holly is joining us today. Holly from the Retro Collective. Who are you, Holly? Who are you? I have no idea who you are.
I have no idea. No, who am I? I am.
Of course I do. I work with Holly every
Absolutely.
day. Holly is one of the directors at the Arcade Archive, who very gracefully stepped up to help when Alex was taking a step back from the Arcade Archive. Holly stepped in, bought up some of those shares so that we could keep the dream and keep the museum alive. So Holly is a perfect guest for Arcade Chat, but not just that, because you are, well, we see you in the cave a lot too, don't we, Holly?
We do. I'm a geek. I like my games.
Yes. Yes. And you're a big fan of the show as well.
Oh, this show, yeah, guilty secret. This is the show I listen to every week on my drive home.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Holly is so dedicated to the cause that her drive is, on a good day, 2.5 hours to get to the cave.
Yeah, 2:40-ish. On a bad day, 5 hours.
On a bad day, she turns up at 3 p.m. and goes, I need to go home now, so I get home on time.
If you're ever lucky enough to visit the Arcade Archive, you will almost certainly see Holly.
And if you're nice to her, she'll give you a tour of the workshop and all of the things going on behind the scenes. So thank you for joining us today, Holly.
Thank you.
This is the part of the show where we talk about what we've been up to this week. I'll go first if you like.
Yeah.
We are hopefully having an exciting week because we're getting the final decision this week on if we can expand the collective into, now what are we calling it, Holly? It's the garage, which was originally called the Pump House.
It is the workshop.
The workshop.
The workshop.
Okay.
Workshop's better than garage
So
because there's no cars involved.
If you're
Pump
familiar
house,
with the mill, the workshop is a detached building in the car park, which we've been using for storage. And then Heba have the rest of it for storage. And off-site, we've also had several storage containers to try and keep our inventory organized. And we've decided, let's all bring it all in-house. Let's try and rent the rest of the workshop, build a dedicated inventory room that we can temperature control eventually, a dedicated lab area, because at the moment there's no heating in the workshop. So I was soldering a Mega ST last week and it got down to 7 degrees and I was trying to film while not getting my breath in shot. It was that cold. So a dedicated room with heating in there, and then just lots of space to work on arcades. And as part of the inventory process, take photos of arcades, document the arcades, share all of that stuff. So really exciting. We'll get the decision this week if we can move in there. And I think that'll make you happy, won't it, Holly?
Well, indeed.
Yeah. And then we'll start thinking about what a workshop needs to have in it. Yeah.
And you've also been doing the inventory project for the mill. You've been crowdsourcing that. Yeah,
so we built a dedicated inventory system a year or so back. And we did the bare minimum to clear the dev den, which was to take photos of everything and asset tag it. And now we've got a wonderful team of 11 volunteers. Thank you to everyone who's helping remotely to fill out all the details. And then once we've done that first 1,700 items, and we're up to over 500 now, we can, as part of the garage project, the workshop project, start photographing everything else, have a dedicated space, get the full inventory, make that public so everyone can explore it. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, a lot more than you see in just the videos. Yeah.
I'm impressed. You talked about this for a while. I mean, literally you talked about this for years and then it didn't seem to make any progress. And I understood why, because it's the last thing that anything like a museum will do is this kind of doesn't need to be done right now thing, and it gets left and left and left. And when you see tours of museums, you can say, I don't want to name and shame anyone. You see tours of museums, you see they've got masses and masses of stuff they'll never need, taking up space in the back. They don't know what they've got, etc. So I'm really impressed that you're finally moving on it, and not just moving on it, but moving on it really fast.
Thank you. And Holly's going to be doing this for the arcade as well. I mean, what's your dream inventory setup, Holly, for an arcade? How do you photograph an arcade?
Oh, I want one of those rolly sort of cake dolly things.
A Lazy Susan.
A Lazy Susan, that's what I was thinking of.
An arcade-sized Lazy Susan.
Yeah, an arcade.
Susan.
Yeah. So we can do a 360 all the way around, see the lovely artwork, see the pink sides of the cabinet.
Yeah.
Bomb jack.
Yeah.
I get
Isn't that
into
what
trouble.
trains used to turn around? A massive Lazy Susan.
Sorry?
Isn't that what steam trains used to turn around? Just a great big
I
Lazy
guess so.
Susan.
Not quite as big as that. I think we can get one, and obviously we've got Richard. He can make us one, I'm sure.
You can 3D print anything.
Yeah.
I got into trouble in the comments last week about Bomb Jack. I said Bomb Jack's great for 5 minutes. What I didn't mean is only 5 minutes. What I mean is if you've only got a few minutes, then Bomb Jack is great to play, whereas some other games are a bit of an undertaking.
Let's be honest, I would be happy if a credit lasted 5 minutes on Bomb Jack.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I go through a lot of credits in 5 minutes as well. But what I mean is, it's great for a quick blast, and you don't need to feel as if you're doing an undertaking. I wasn't having a go at Bomb Jack.
I only play it for 5 minutes anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah.
There you go.
Anyone got anything to add about their week? What retro things have you been up to?
I've been doing nothing because I've been ill.
Oh, Dave.
I'm
Ollie?
better now, though. Feel good today.
I've managed to find these.
What are you holding up there?
we see
Tetris?
those?
It says Tetris on the packet.
These are Gummy Bears Tetris. They do Space Invaders and Pac-Man and a few other flavours.
All right, how much are they paying you to promote this, Ollie?
Nothing yet.
Are you going to start selling them in the archive?
Would like to, yes. But I thought they were rather cool, rather retro.
It was edibles. Nice.
Yep.
No wonder you're so chill all the time, Ollie. Right, should we get into our first story?
In 1981, International Business Machines, IBM, introduced the IBM PC. The first model, the 5150, was a beast. You could use it as a boat anchor. Thick metal, housed an Intel 8088, not an 8086. It was a cut-down 8088 they used. And this great big machine used the desktop form factor. It, of course, wasn't the first to do so, but it's the first in the IBM PC line. It's an iconic design, and it's what every other thing came from. It was an immediate success, selling almost 10 times as much as IBM initially anticipated. And this is a real surprise to me, and I don't really think it's any way true for the UK market, but more than half of them were purchased by home users. So that must have been relatively affluent American people with a lot of money, because it cost at the time $1,565, which is the equivalent of $5,400 now. So that's more than what you would buy yourself for Christmas, I would think.
What's that in UK money?
4,500. Let's lie and say I've checked that.
I'll check that for you. That's £4,294.
Not far off, was it?
Yeah. Chunk.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. That's more than a graphics card. So this was the start of the IBM PC compatible machines, and at least for the early 80s, IBM had it their way. If you wanted an IBM, you bought an IBM, and you paid a lot of money for it. Workalikes started to appear, so things that were similar or very close or could use the files or were somewhat compatible.
Like the IBM PC Junior.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. The Tandy 2000, that type of thing. But finally, in 1984, the Phoenix BIOS was created, famous story, and IBM couldn't stop it because it was developed in a clean room without using IBM code. Well, at least they claim it was developed in a clean room without IBM code.
Innocent until proven otherwise, yeah.
Yeah. Because IBM used mostly off-the-shelf components in their computers, it meant that clones of the IBM could be made that were just as good, or at least could just be as good, or in some ways could be much better in terms of what the specifications were than what you got from IBM. The Phoenix BIOS in 1984 is probably one of the most important advances in computing, although it's not actually that special in terms of what it does. It's just a BIOS for an 8086 family computer, and it's a fraction of what modern BIOSes do, so it's not in itself particularly complicated. It's just the fact that it unlocked the market. Manufacturers made BIOSes all the time, but because this kind of created a clone industry and unlocked it from IBM, it's really important. And all anyone needed to do is pay a few $100,000 to Phoenix to license it. It, of course, wasn't the last one to be made. Compatibles generally followed IBM's design language in some ways, usually having two tones and trying at least to look industrial, premium, robust, but that didn't last. The PC market had enormous pressure to reduce costs in the second half of the 80s, which continued into the 90s, and by the eventual end of the 90s, PCs were incredibly inexpensive. Huge difference.
Are we going to give a shout out to Mr. Alan Sugar at this point for his part in that in Europe?
Yes, he did it in the UK, in
Europe, in the whole of Europe, really, with his Amstrad PCs.
The end of the 80s saw his Amstrad PCs come out, and even though IBMs are all made just round the corner from me in Greenock, I think most people bought Amstrads because they were a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
The tipping point, I think, came in the early 90s. And at that point, normal people might consider having a PC. I got mine in 1992, I think. Neil, when did you get yours?
Yeah, around 93. And I did see a comment on one of my videos recently, and I thought it's a bit controversial and a lot of people would disagree with it, but it just said most people in the UK didn't even think about PC gaming until about 1993 or, having PCs. And, I mean, really that just coincides with the demise of the 16-bit platforms and where are you going to go next to keep your gaming going. There were plenty of people using PCs before then, but for people like you and I who were happy with our Atari STs and our Amigas and our Archimedes or even still our ZX Spectrums, what were you using, Holly, in 1992?
1992, I think I had a really old, what was it, 8088 processor.
Okay, so you're on the PC.
But I think it was at 93. I went down Tottenham Court Road, Morgan Computers, and bought an IBM PS1.
Yeah. So if we're talking about gaming, that's very different to just general PC ownership.
Yeah. Oh, that was my gaming machine. That was, I overclocked that and modified it, and that's what I played Doom on.
Why did you choose an IBM rather than a cheaper one?
It was cheap. It was Morgan. Yeah. It was. I think it was like £199.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And the price just kept falling in the 90s, although it wasn't obvious it was going to keep falling, because I think at the time, every year from 1992 onwards, we must have thought, they can't get any cheaper than this. They can't get any cheaper than this. And they did. I mean, LGR, our friend Clint, has a video on a PC that was essentially free towards the end of the 90s because it came with a broadband subscription. A key design change did happen during the early 90s. Until then, most PCs were in a desktop form factor. So that's a flat box. But by the mid-90s, I think most were in a tower form factor. And from that point onwards, they still are for a big box PC. Now, today's submission is from Evan B. Thompson. And it's about Silverstone, who are taking us back in time to, let's say, call it 1990, I think, to a desktop case that looks, on first look, to be exactly what we were using back then. And it's not a huge difficulty to make this because although we used ISA cards back then and then moved to eISA, PCI, EGP, etc., we've kept the same form factor. Cards are the same height, so a basic machine is still the same. And the only real difference was where the I/O output plate was and where the holes were for the standoffs. This case that Silverstone have made is a desktop case in beige, and it looks just like those. It's all one colour of beige. I've seen it said that it's designed based on an NEC PC 9800, which is a Japanese computer, and I don't agree. The Japanese computer has two colours on it. This doesn't. I think it just looks like a boring beige desktop PC.
I don't know if it's the logo at the top left or what it is, but it looks a little bit like something Sun might have made, a little Sun workstation or something.
Yeah. It just looks sort of generic-y, sort of early 90s. Yeah.
It actually came from, and we actually covered this at the time, it came from an April Fool's joke. So they announced this on April Fool's Day, saying, we're going back to old beige desktop PCs. And the response was extremely warm from lots of people. Lots of people wanted it. And I wondered how much of a joke they actually were making. Did someone do this April Fool's Day thinking, I hope people like this because I want to make it? So they've ended up making something that is suitable for a full-on PC. They've even got an example that's water-cooled, so there's plenty of room inside it to build a normal PC, and you can have your sleeper build in it. My only gripe with it is it has two 5.25-inch drives, but they're fake. They look fake. And I don't think anyone will look at these and think they're really 5.25-inch bays. Behind one is the front I/O, so your USB connections and so on. And the other is an optical bay, so you could put an optical drive in there. And I don't think you'd need any more. I don't think you'd really need any more than one optical drive in it. So, Holly, what do you think about desktop cases? What's your favourite? And do you think you might be tempted to build a new beige PC?
My favourite is the IBMs, those 5150s, and the PS1, because that was my first machine, that little one that had the 10-inch monitor on top.
Mm-hmm.
I love that thing. So I modded it to pieces. It was an SX16, and I think the time I finished it, it was a 386 SX16. And by the time I finished with it, it was a 4X, DX, something else ridiculous.
Is that the one with the really satisfying power switch on it?
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, and the power's in the monitor.
Okay.
Did you hear that, Neil?
I heard that. That's a lovely click.
That's my PS2.
We have two in the cave, don't worry.
We do. We've also got a 5160, not 5150. Thank you, Control-Alt-Reese, by the way. That came from him. And thank you to Rob, who brought over a monitor to go with that at some point. So, and I recently got an IBM keyboard as well, another one. So we've got to put together a 5150, 5160 display at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are my favourite. If I wanted a new created case, that's what I'd want, one of those IBMs.
Yeah. Yeah, this generic one it really is generic. It really does look generic. My IBM, I've never owned an IBM until recently. I've got a PS2 here, which is wonderful. It just looks the part. It's only a 286. It's not even a good 286 in terms of what they've done with it, but it looks the part. I absolutely love how the desktop case looks.
When you told me about this, Dave, I looked it up and I saw the pre-rendered images of it, and I thought that looks great. I've just, while you've been talking, looked at the actual photos of it that have come out, and it looks far more generic in these photos. The pre-rendered ones looks a lot nicer, I think.
I think they added shadows to that, or the pre-rendered ones that gave it more definition than it really does.
Yeah. So looking at this, it's a desktop. It's very chunky. It's got a lot of height to it to be able to fit a modern system in. And do you know what this is? This is a tower PC on its side. It's those dimensions. It's not trying to be a slimline desktop. This is a tower PC that they've just put a different fascia and drive cage on, isn't it?
Yeah, I should point out that desktop cases came in two kind of flavors. Some came and you put the cards directly in, which is what this went in. So they had to be the full height to take the standoffs, the motherboard and the card. But lots of desktops, including the IBM PS2, for example, had a riser. Yeah. So the riser meant that it went in there and the cards were parallel to the motherboard, meaning it didn't need to be as high. And they've obviously not done that because it just wouldn't work in a modern PC.
Or there was the third awful option of half-height cards, which totally restricted you in what you could install in these machines.
There's actually a lot of half-height cards around now. There's a lot more demand for half-height cards, but yeah, very, very restrictive.
The rise of the tower PC, though, that came before the advent of flat screens, we have to remember. So you could put the failing of the fashion of desktops. Well, you can't put the failing of desktops down to no longer needing to act as a CRT monitor stand. But that's what we used them for, isn't it? They rose up our CRTs to be at the right height. Removable media was right in front of us and accessible. The number of desktop PCs, though, that I had where the keyboard was right on the edge of my desk, if not overhanging the desk, is unreal because it took up so much desk space. So it made sense to move to a tower PC, if only to give yourself more keyboard space, even with a CRT on the desk. It gave us more space. Yes, Holly, you're jumping up and down.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Yeah, later on the tower, I mean, I don't know if you have, but I aspired to those huge, humongous towers, sit on the floor. That's what I had. I had
with
my
wheels.
No, I had a big foot on mine.
I've got a Lian Li huge full-size tower for my network attached stories, my NAS, and it's lovely to look at. It's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. The problem is you've got to make sure your cables are long enough to reach everything inside the tower.
I seem to remember my motherboard was about that big, sort of tiny little postage stamp in the corner of the case. It was silly.
And towers, they gave you more space, more options for upgrades. They gave you the option to rip your PC out entirely and keep the tower and just replace your PC in it without any problems. So it was only with nostalgia that I started actually thinking about desktop cases again. I was happy with towers. And I think that nostalgia is best reflected in the video I made about the Checkmate case for the Mister system, because that's a few years old now. But long before the Heber's multi-system was available, I wanted this time machine that felt more special than a Mister Stack or just a generic-looking tower. And the Checkmate, the desktop form factor, solved that for me. I really liked that.
The Checkmate is more the kind of pizza box form factor than the desktop big box. It'll be, I'm looking at my Checkmate here, and it'll be something a little bit bigger than half the height of the Silverstone will be.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference in height.
That's why I'm looking at the Silverstone and saying, that's just a tower on its side.
If you've got a modern monitor, I mean, back then you'd be using a 13, 14-inch monitor. In the early 90s. If you've got a 13 or 14-inch monitor on top of the tower case, top of the desktop case, that's fine. If you've got what's equivalent to a 21-inch CRT, a kind of 24-inch or 25, 26, 28-inch thing there, it's going to end up too high sitting on this desktop.
It is, isn't it? I think so. So you'll end up putting the desktop on its side like a tower next to it. Yeah. Multi-system, by the way, is on sale again. Heber have produced some more at shop.heber.co.uk. I'm going to smile at the camera. And Duncan's going to make a little ding at my teeth. Thank you. And also, is it just me now, or do we have bigger desks? Even though we've got flatter monitors, it feels like desks are actually properly made to cater to PCs, whereas back then it was like you had some kind of writing desk and you were trying to just make your PC work on it.
Well, this room I'm in now, when I decided how to do this room, I've got worktops, kitchen worktops, which are 60 centimetres deep. And I have the top layer, which is 60 centimetres from the wall, and the bottom layer is offset 30 centimetres from it. So the bottom layer ends up being 90 centimetres from the wall. And that's because I've got a line of CRTs here.
Yeah.
And without that 90 centimetre depth, the CRTs are unpleasant to use.
Yeah.
You would have found that in the cave as well, wouldn't you, Neil?
Oh, yeah, that's why we used the scaffold boards and like really deep desks for everything. And the monitor stands as well to help tuck them, especially the wedge PCs, just tuck them under there. But yeah, I mean, we're getting into the office ergonomics now, which have come a long way. I popped into a marketing agency for something last week. And when I got in there, it's exactly how you would expect a marketing agency to be. 8 people sharing this long, trendy table. And they were all slouched over laptops. They were using MacBooks. And this was their office environment, just sort of makeshift chairs, a long table. This is how they worked all day, every day. And you're probably the same as me. I spent decades going through workstation assessment forms before I could start a new job, sign off that my CRT was at the correct height. I wasn't going to get crippled with RSI. And that seems increasingly to have all gone out the window. Is this perhaps a hangover of the rise of the smartphone and the tablet, and a laptop's now seen as sort of an extension of those kinds of devices that don't warrant the kind of scrutiny that they had? I know, Holly, you work in a corporate environment for your day job. Is this still a thing?
It is still a thing, but yeah, if you sign someone over to a laptop, which we probably do 80% of the time now, you put all the onus on them, so it's up to them.
Yeah. You can't stop them from trying to balance it on a steering wheel in a car and use it. Yeah.
I work in a corporate environment as well, and we have a risk assessment to complete ourselves once a year. And I think the company just wants to say, you completed the risk assessment, it's now your fault.
Oh, yeah.
But I can fill in a risk assessment and end up with a footrest type thing. I can end up with the mouse that you grab and move rather than the other type of mouse.
A mouse that you grab and move, Dave?
Yeah, halfway through saying that, I thought that's like every other mouse. You know, the ones you grab like that on the top, and I can end a chair and all the rest of it. But I think people are happy with their terrible Apple keyboards.
Oh, let's not get onto the low-profile keyboards. That's a chat for another day.
They're disgusting. They should be banned. The UN should get involved.
I'm still using my Simulant Amiga clicky mechanical keyboard. I love it.
Has a proper travel distance on the keys. 1 millimeter travel distance is no use for anyone. Apple, if you're listening, stop it.
And my wired Microsoft ergonomic mouse. Fine with that. And like anything less than 2 screens, I just can't work with less than 2 screens. Anyway, let's get back to the story. This is supposed to be a discussion about a case. It's a nice looking case. It hits the nostalgia buttons. I imagine it will be cheaper than something like the Checkmate because it's going to be made in higher quantities by Silverstone. So have we got a retail price for it, Dave? Do we know what this is?
I'm just going to do that now. I don't think I saw one. But let's have a look.
And I don't know that I'd put a modern PC in it, but I'd certainly use it as a project case for maybe another Mister. Or what about a Multi-Pi? Available at shop.heba.co.uk.
Can't find a price for it. Multi-Pi, yeah. No, I wouldn't put a Multi-Pi in it.
Just a project box, I think I would use it for. Yeah, Holly.
Did I not read in that article it's probably only going to be available in Japan anyway? That's
for goodness sake, why have we had this conversation? Dave.
Duncan, edit out this entire section. It isn't for me. For the reasons I've said, it's not for me. I do like, though, I mean, it pleases me immensely to see it. But I wonder if I built my last modern desktop, because I've got this pinball table that a full gaming PC is going in. So my next desktop will likely be a thin client thing because they're now eminently powerful enough to do things.
A pinball table is not a desktop form factor, Dave.
But I can run a cable out the back of it. I can run a cable out the back of it, sorry.
Holly.
Did you say pinball?
Oh, what have you got there?
Is that Pinball Fantasy's logo? It is. And you recognise that. I love that game. What a fantastic game on the PC and Amiga.
It's time now to thank our sponsors. Who's our sponsor this week, Holly?
I'm imagining
That's right. It's pixel.addict.media, who bring out magazines how often, Dave?
Every time they feel like it.
Yep, that's right. And what's in the latest issue, Dave?
Dizzy. It's an egg special. Fantasy World Dizzy, they say, is arguably the most iconic game the Oliver Twins and Codemaster ever released. Is that? I don't think I could disagree with that. You can argue it is. 35 years history of it, so they have got the Oliver Twins to discuss their fondness for Dizzy. It's a Christmas issue, so they've got a retrospective of the infamous DOS game Home Alone.
You can tell it's a Christmas issue because there's Macaulay Culkin on the cover.
Yep. Oh, yes, he is down there. He's doing his scream pose. Yeah. Bubble Bobble arcade secrets and tips. There's loads of those. It's so packed with secrets. Lots of stuff in there. They've also, don't forget, got Atari Addict coming out. They'll have reached the tipping point, so that'll be on production now. But where can people go if they want to buy the PDF or get a copy delivered? Holly, what's the URL?
That's right. It's pixel.addict.media. And there's also, by the way, there's an interview in there with famous YouTuber Mark Fixes Stuff, but don't let that put you off.
Oh, and he's going to talk about lemmings, isn't he? Thank you for sponsoring us.
Is it just me who enjoys installing old operating systems?
No, I enjoy it as well.
Not just in a nostalgic sense, but back in the day, the anticipation of the upgrade. What difference will it make to my computer? What new things can I run on it? Will I be able to enjoy smoother video playback, more colors, better resolutions? What screensavers and wallpapers will come bundled on it? I know that sounds like a really sad thing to say, but these were exciting things back in the day. An operating system upgrade was a big thing. It's easy to forget when you've gone from Windows 7 to 10 to 11, and it kind of feels like exactly the same thing.
Did we miss out Windows 8? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Or Windows 8 with a retro start menu, third-party option installed. Anyway, I confess that I enjoyed it, and it was a regular part of my computer maintenance. As a 90s PC owner who used Windows, yes, defragmenting and keeping your temp files cleaned up was important for system performance. But if, like me, you love trying out all the different utilities and demos and programs that came on cover discs and CDs, you would probably also be wiping the slate clean periodically. I had the process fine-tuned, and I probably wiped my computer and reinstalled Windows every 2 to 3 months, sometimes more often, which sounds insane. But, things got messy, and I still twitch a bit now when I think I haven't clean installed Windows actually for years. I've upgraded it through multiple versions, but it does seem to do a much better job of cleaning up its own mess and that of other programs that have used it. And if all goes wrong, there are nice features to just kind of roll it back rather than having to do a complete reinstall. Anyway, I've been reminiscing about this today because old Windows developer Raymond Chen has been sharing how the Windows 95 setup program was actually 3 programs masquerading as one. If you ran the setup from MS-DOS, did we all do that here? Did we run the Windows 95 setup from MS-DOS at some point?
Yeah, I always, and this is my tip for people listening. If you're going to install Windows 98 second edition, which is the one you should use, go into a DOS boot disk, F-disk your target disk and prepare it, and then start Smart Drive and then copy the entire Windows install across to a directory on your new hard drive and install from there. You will thank me for it.
There you go. Dave's tips. Can we have a theme tune for that, please, Holly, for Dave's tips?
Yeah.
Go on then. Do us one.
Me?
Yeah, do it. Go on. You talk in or something.
Dave tips.
There we go.
Cool, fast, Dave tips.
There we go. Nice. Dave's tips. You also, it's good to have the install files on your hard disk anyway for a later date when you're updating drivers and things like that. But that's easy to say in the modern day. You know, hard disk space was at a premium back then. And
you couldn't do it back then. No,
you couldn't do it back then.
You'd be daft.
No. So anyway, if you ran that Windows 95 MS-DOS setup, it actually begins, we've discovered, thanks to Raymond, with a stripped-out version of Windows 3.1. That's what it loads to present the GUI and the setup options initially. And apparently this is something Microsoft also did with Excel. If you had Excel back in the day and you didn't have Windows on your PC, it would launch a minimal version of Windows 2.1 and then Excel on top of it. So you were effectively running a version of Windows.
Is this Excel for DOS?
Which Excel would it have been? Maybe it was presented as being for DOS, but actually sneakily running in Windows because
that's
Windows wasn't sort of the default operating system. It was a bonus. Yeah. So once into this Windows 3.1 portion of the setup, it would run a 16-bit Windows app, and this would do the work of hardware detection, asking the user what optional components they wanted, and then copy the files over. And then finally, setup would reboot, and this time it would reboot into Windows 95, running a 32-bit app to complete the final steps of installing the OS. If you're familiar with the process, if you've done it before, it probably all makes sense to you now when you really think about it. It was 3 programs pretending to be one. I love hearing about these little secrets from inside Microsoft now that the technology is so old that we're allowed to see through, at least a little bit, see through a crack in the door, and Microsoft allow this kind of information to be shared. Really do like hearing these stories. Dave, let's talk about Windows 95, 98 era PC maintenance. Did you clean install your PC daily, weekly, monthly? How often were you cleaning up your mess?
Every time a new pixel addict came through my door, I would do it.
Yeah.
So first of all, it does make sense about the 3 things in one. When I think back, it makes clear sense, but I never thought about it that way. Did I reinstall Windows often? Yes, I did. I started doing it in Windows 95. I never stopped doing it. I certainly wasn't alone. You did it. I did it. I think everybody, the first thing you had any problems with a game is, have you tried reinstalling Windows? Which then became, have you tried cleaning your cookies? But have you tried reinstalling Windows? I did it all the time. I've never stopped doing it. In fact, these days, it's easier than ever to do it because with OneDrive, and I like OneDrive. I know you're supposed to hate OneDrive, but I don't. With OneDrive, it's reasonably easy. I've got a NAS to reinstall Windows without losing much at all. So it's not a big deal to do it these days. I don't do it as often these days, maybe every year or so. But back then, every few months, easily. And then every time something went unreliable, you would do it. And it may not fix it, but you couldn't rule out reinstalling Windows to try and fix it.
It was probably less confusing in the 95 days. And then you had this sort of more confusing period. And then the modern day, it's quite easy to do it. Because back in 95, it still wasn't truly a multi-user operating system. Yeah. Desktop was in Windows/desktop. You weren't going into user profiles and all of that stuff. So you could just sort of copy those bits, reinstall Windows, copy them back. You're done. Yeah.
Do you remember installing Windows 95 and Windows 98, Windows 95 more than 98? and you're getting to that point of hardware detection and getting scared.
I don't know if it was genuine fear, but
oh no,
there was do I leave the room or do I just sit and watch this? Will it be done when I come back, or will it be waiting for me to click on something, or will it have blue screen?
Don't breathe too heavily.
More so because Windows 95 for me actually started with the beta version. I had a stack of discs from a beta tester, and then I went on to the CD release. But yeah, I think I probably just sat and watched the progress bar. This was before the days of the throbber.
These days, I suggest you use Windows 11 debloat, which is a PowerShell script.
Oh, yeah.
That's another tip for you. Install Windows 11, run that, and it makes a world of difference to it.
Tip theme tune, please.
Oh, your turn this time.
Dave's tips. Whoa. What were your experiences, Holly? Were you a reinstaller?
For other people, I didn't actually go over to 95. So I remember seeing it at Chicago and having it as a beta copy, and it had some very weird install setups. But I was running NT 3.5 and all my gaming, I would drop back into DOS. Well, actually reboot into another partition into DOS and play all my games there.
So instead of a lovely cloudy startup screen, you just had the blue screen and the white bar to load Windows.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was clean, it worked perfectly. And then as soon as NT4 came out, I jumped on that. So I had 95-esque environment through NT.
Fair enough.
Did you feel you were missing out in any way? There was nothing you could
I was
do.
missing out on blue screens and crashing and things not working. And everything was working perfectly in a proper 32-bit environment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, NT was fantastic, and we all got on board with XP eventually.
Yeah. XP was great. I mean, it really was. It was a huge step forward from Windows 98. But Windows 98 ST, if you're doing any kind of DOS stuff, that's the one to use.
So yeah, Holly didn't have to really. Did you have to reinstall NT though? Did you feel like you had to do it to keep it clean, or did it look after itself?
Not 3.5. 3.5 was really stable.
Yeah.
I think 4. Yeah, I think 4 had a few extra problems that it obviously brought over from 95.
And you're more likely to be playing with things like SCSI drivers and
absolutely, yeah, it's all SCSI
like
and Taiwan stuff for the scanner and all that sort of stuff.
In NT world, yeah. Well, in terms of stability and crashing in 95, I think I've always maintained that it depends what you're doing in Windows 95. Certainly. Like both of you, gaming was still 99% in MS-DOS for me. If I tried to run a DOS game in Windows, it was mostly just out of curiosity. I knew I'd be taking a performance hit for doing it with the overheads of Windows. If I was running Office or AMI Pro or some kind of productivity software, it didn't really crash for me. Probably because I was reinstalling the OS so often. But the main gripe I always had back then was the page file grinding away because I didn't have enough RAM to multitask with large documents in
just download more.
Any substantial way. Just download more RAM. To the point where I would remove my desktop background to free up more RAM. This is the sort of things we're talking about. And I think RAM and hard disks are really what a lot of people are complaining about when they think about Windows causing them pain in the 90s. As a home user, that is. I'm not talking about corporate users and NT. I think if you ran Windows 95 today with some solid state storage and a chunk of RAM, you are going to have an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, done it. True.
Yeah. But, it's akin to saying if you put a Ferrari engine in a Fiat 500, you'll have a nicer time. I know, but that Fiat 500 always wanted to be a Ferrari.
The other thing that's different now when I use Windows 98 compared to how I did back in the day is now I'm not trying to do a lot of work multitasking. I'm not trying to do ICQ as well as email, as well as Zmud, as well as browsers, as well as then gaming, and not wanting. I don't know how long it took me to get to the point where I didn't want to shut everything down to run a game, because obviously before Windows 95, you never would think about doing two things at once. But at a certain point between Windows 95 and XP, I got to the point where I wanted all this stuff running in the background and running games, and then Alt-Tab, and it would all crash.
And you've got Git right in the corner there, downloading files as and when you dial up.
Don't know what you mean. What's Get Right for?
Right,
Piracy. Piracy. I wouldn't download a game.
Purposes. Thank you. Yes, Holly.
I think the biggest limitation back then was RAM. It was so expensive, and you just couldn't afford it.
Yeah. So your hard disk was thrashing away,
Yeah.
but not for Holly, because she had 3 drives in RAID 5 and all the RAM she could get out of her corporate budget. So she was happy. But yeah, do share your Windows 95 memories. Let us know what you think over at reddit.com/, This Week in Retro, where you can submit stories that you might like us to talk about. You can comment on the stories we do talk about, and you can do all that good stuff. Let's go to Dave's housekeeping.
Housekeeping.
We mentioned last week that we're now on Blue Sky as well as Twitter, and we're intending restarting our presence on Facebook. We will be wherever you are, and the hope is to try and give listeners and viewers a little bit extra, maybe an outtake, a little bit of a hype about the coming episode, and that type of thing during the week to keep you interested and thinking about the show, and hopefully get the numbers up and let new people know about us.
Yeah, and you'll be introducing your new section, won't you, Dave? Dave's Politics Corner.
Yeah, Dave, Politics Corner, yeah. We're all about the politics now, yeah. No, we're not about politics. We want this to be a place where you can come and not be reminded about politics and not have to think about it. You can't escape it these days. Stop it. No more politics. Something we've been keeping quiet about and watching the numbers on is our subscription count, because we wanted to hit 10,000 by the end of the year, and we are nearly there, but we do need a little bit of a push. If you're not subscribed to us and you're listening to this, go to YouTube and do it now. I'm not asking, I'm telling. We are 200 short of the big 10,000. We would love it if we managed to reach £10,000. £10,000?
What?
Yeah.
Dave,
What?
Hang on. What have you been keeping from Duncan and me? £10,000?
10,000 subscribers. Please go and subscribe to us. We're 200 short of the big number, and we'd love to hit that for episode 200, which will be our last episode this year, the final episode of the year. The Christmas episode will be episode 200, and I'd love it if we reach 10,000 by then. There's a strange thing at the top of the subreddits submitted articles this week, and it's a self-post by Henrik, the designer of the Relatively Universal ROM Programmer, which is an open-source EEPROM programmer which costs very little to build, and anyone can go and do it. You can order it on PCBWay, for example. It's quite interesting, really. Holly, do you do much ROM programming in the arcade?
I do. I had to do quite a bit for the Lemmings board, and it would be nice to have another one. At the moment, I recommend a Canadian one. So this
Canadian one?
Yeah, this is a quite a famous Canadian programmer, but it does PALs, GALs, Atmels, lots of other stuff as well. The only problem is the software is terrible.
Right.
So the device is lovely, software absolutely atrocious.
And I take it the software has to come from them, and it's not a group effort. Yeah.
Exactly. This is not open source. It's totally closed, so it's a real pain. So seeing something else out there that's open source, a bit more freely available would be great. Yeah, I will look into it.
Lord Borak tells us this week that the Amiga is dead. Hang on a minute. No, he doesn't. And that outruns Japanese...
I may have added that in.
And the Outruns Japanese mobile phone port has been preserved, and it's a very good port too, so check that one out.
It really is a good port. Last week I said I've been talking about Terahawks, and I don't know why the subject had come up, but I think it's maybe why. Pajako has linked us to a doco, and it's called Hand-Drawn CGI.
Terahawks, I think that came up on everyone's feed. Everyone at the Cave was talking about it. We all watched that video on the animation series. So I think collectively everyone's got that message.
Yeah, I love Terahawks back in the day.
Yeah, it's great.
Crafty Log 6915, which sounds like something you do on company time, links us to a doco, mate, on how the Sega Saturn works. It's from Retro48K, and it's a small channel with just over 1,000 subs, but the video is taking off with 13,000 views in just 2 days, which means people loves it. People they loves it.
Loves it. You loved it, do you,
Neil? More coffee, please.
42, nobody 42, links us to an image of peak performance on the Game Boy, or so it says. It's got that bolt-on magnifying screen I'm sure you've all seen. the bolt-on speakers in the bottom, knobs on top of the controllers, and what I think is maybe an external battery thing that you can use as an arm to hold it as well. But it does make me think, is that peak performance Game Boy, or is it the new $200 FPGA one that's just come out?
The Spectrum, which is Retro Games Limited's inexpensive remake of the rubber-keyed 48K model shell, but emulates up to 128K Spectrum, has come out to very good reviews. It seems they've got the process of packaging and bundling these emulated systems down to a very slick process, and the onboard features like rewind and save states are certainly being well received in reviews. Lord Borak links us to the time extension review, and Shep071 links us to a video from Noel's Retro Lab where he reviews the Spectrum, and I know he's a big Spectrum fan and knows it inside out, so that's as good a place as any, I think, to watch a review.
I watched Noel's video, and it's really worth a watch to find out about it. It's a good video, it's well done, it's interesting, kept my attention the whole way through. If you want to have a Spectrum that you can just plug in and use with none of the hassle, then this little device seems to be ideal for it. Holly, do you want a BBC remake?
Ooh, I do and I don't. It's like meeting a hero. I don't want it ruined. The Beeb is perfect. Do I want a remake? I do.
You've got an Aegon.
I know, but I like the Aegon, but it's a Z80, and I don't like the Z80.
Where's it available from, Holly?
The Aegon is available from retrocollective.co.uk shop.
Yeah. The Aegon does use BBC Basic, and the BBC did have a Z80 if you stuck one into it.
In the tube.
If you had a second processor, yeah.
Yeah. I think, I can't remember, but Retro Games, they had a roadmap, didn't they? And is the full-sized Amiga the next thing that they're going to be announcing? I can't remember.
Keep talking about it, but I haven't heard anything for a while now. Everyone wants this full-size Amiga to come out, because I reckon the full-size Amiga is a great entry point for people who had the Amiga, or people who want a cheap way to experience it. But also, I reckon this Amiga will end up getting bought by people who think, I'm going to eventually rip the guts out and stick an FPGA in.
We'll see. Maybe that'll be launched at Ravi's Kickstart event or something like that. That would be a good platform for that one to come out. Dr. Local links us to an article about playing games in nature. It's a guy taking a full console setup, including a CRT, to various outdoor places. I think they call that naturism, don't they, Dave? Is that what?
No, they don't, Neil. But I think the point of this is to get social media engagement, to video people reacting to it. It's maybe a little bit cynical there. There is lots and lots more on the subreddit. The subreddit is a great place to go if you're going for a crafty log at work, for example. If you're on the bus, time to kill, on a train, in a meeting, on a Zoom meeting that should have been an email, get your phone out and have a look at our subreddit for something to pass your time. And also, if you see anything interesting, submit it to the subreddit to help us find interesting articles to talk about next week.
Or anything boring. We'll take anything.
Yeah. Have you seen the new Dune films?
No.
Part 1.
They're pretty good. They are pretty good. I'm not sure if I like them better than the original David Lynch film or not.
Yeah.
And it's hard to turn what is possibly one of the best novels ever written into a film at all. But it's one of my favourite books, and the films are pretty good. What I didn't think I needed, and what I didn't know existed, was Zendaya action figures. She plays Chani in Dune, and she's also in Spider-Man as well. But why am I talking about this? Well, it's about UK retailer Game, the shop that sacked Chris. And today I'm going to call it, they're finished in terms of game retailing. Game are done. They're going to be nothing more than selling codes for store credit and Steam and the PlayStation shop, and a few keep cases with activation codes inside them, and plastic trinkets and all the rest of it, just like what you see in concessions through loads of different stores like Asda or HMV or whatever. Christ of Why Do You has linked us a Eurogamer article on what's been going on recently. And I should say the word alleged here, because they are getting their information from employees or ex-employees. So it's difficult for them to verify all this. So they make it clear it's what they've been told. And of course, it's difficult to corroborate a lot of this. But it sounds to me as if it's true enough to say to them, as 2024 is the year that they went from a company doing games to just about nothing.
So you'll speak of Christ of Why Do You as Why Don't You? Wasn't Why Don't You a kids' TV show?
Yeah, Saturday morning. Yeah, don't you?
Sorry, I've been thinking about that. I haven't thought about that show for decades.
I've thought about that show every time I see his username.
Okay.
So that's why I did that. I'm bound to slip. I wonder, Christ of Why Do You? Please let us know if that's based on Why Don't You. The article is called Inside the Fall of Game. And you'd normally expect a headline like that to be clickbait exaggeration, but I don't think it is. I think this is the end for Game, at least in the UK. And I think maybe the end happened before now, but this is it beyond any doubt. At the start of the year, they stopped doing trade-ins and they stopped selling second-hand games. They also told their staff they were going to be made redundant or moved on to zero-hour contracts. And a zero-hour contract in the UK is one where you're not guaranteed any work, and it's dependent on the employer if you get anything that week or not. So they could tell you you're working 35 hours this week, and next week you're getting nothing. They've done lots of mess-ups and pre-orders of games. They've compounded delays of pre-orders with no website access for customers to find out what's happened. They were bought by Mike Ashley's Fraser Group, a low-quality retailer selling lots of things on brand names that used to have a better reputation, but they've bought the brand names on the cheap just to badge it on cheaper stuff. They've moved on from having actual full-on shops to having just concessions within Sports Direct shops. And according to Eurogamer, that distinction has blurred, with game staff being told that they now work on general merchandise within the Sports Direct shop.
I mean, that's my exact experience that I've shared in a few recent shows. My local Sports Direct is where the local game is, and it's just a stand of gift vouchers in amongst sports shoes and basketballs.
Yeah. Lots of management have been got rid of. They've got rid of all of their area managers, so now each shop speaks directly to head office. There's no shop manager role. It's now a lower paid concession manager. And allegedly 78% of head office staff have gone since the 1st of August. Which is a huge number, according to someone speaking to Eurogamer. And I don't know if that's 1st of August this year or last year. It's a huge number, even if it's last year. They report that there's no game staff doing ordering at HQ, which would explain why pre-orders are late and they forgot to order things like steel case editions. I know that game ordering is more complicated than it might seem. You have to order certain amounts to get to be able to order special editions and so on, and they haven't been doing that. And certainly if you're pre-ordering something from a shop and it doesn't come, I'd say that's the last time you use that shop.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're pre-ordering something, you want it on day one. So getting that wrong, I think, is fatal. If you're a brick and mortar store and you're competing with Steam and Amazon, then you need to be on your game, and Game are clearly not on their game.
No.
Game over. And that all
there
leads
it is. I was wondering how long it would take you to actually say game over. How did you get this far in the story? There it is.
Yeah.
And it all leads up to this amazing quote. It all appears, this amazing quote from the article. It appears on the surface to all of us that yes, whoever is in the game head office now does not understand what a game specialist is. And another staff member said, the last delivery we had at our store, there were no new releases, no games, no accessories. Instead, we received 136 Zendaya action figures. What a sentence. So it leaves CEX alone in the market for a UK chain of game shops. But I'm interested to hear from our viewers abroad. Please do add in the comments, is the UK ahead of the game in the demise of big chain game retailing, or is this happening everywhere? Is the UK experience the norm? Are your big chains surviving or not? But Holly, let's get your thoughts of this. And let's get straight to the answer of the question of the week, which will be this week. How many Zendaya action figures do you buy in an average month?
10. Easy. 10 or more.
Now, what do you think of all this?
It's a shame. I was never the biggest fan of game, but I did have a game card. My son, so he had a PS4 before we built him his PC. And I think we also went and got his SteelSeries keyboard from Game as well, so he got to try it out. So, yeah, it had a great purpose. I traded in games. I've now got a game card that's got credit on it that I can't spend because they don't...
Well, you can if you like action figures.
Yeah, lovely.
I mean, if they did an Alan Sugar or a Clive Sinclair action figure,
Or a Stroud Man. If they did a Stroud Man, well, there we are.
there you go. I mean, what staggers me most about Game is how did they not see it coming? When your sole aim is to sell video games, and those games have been moving to online delivery for decades now, how did they not maneuver their business differently? I mean, at one end of the scale, I'd say the easy end of the scale, you see the writings on the wall 20 years ago. And I guess you just sell up. You just go, right, we're at our peak. This is the time to sell. Hindsight is wonderful, I know. At the difficult end of the scale, you say 20 years ago, well, let's get involved with online delivery somehow. And it's ridiculous for me to say, just make your own Steam. But 20 years ago, that is something they could have maybe looked at when they were financially doing very well and they were looking to the future. Surely they had a 5 or a 10-year plan somewhere. And they had board meetings to discuss this, didn't they?
Well, they sold out to Mike Ashley in 2019, so he's had them now for 5 years. But he's seen them just go through a decline. Surely he's not managed to extract the profit from it he was going to, and he's now left with something that's worth less than what it was, certainly. I would say the brand now is worth virtually nothing.
Yeah, this is I'm talking about decisions that should have been made in 2004, 2005, when everyone was getting always on broadband, and Steam was on the rise, and Half-Life 2, Holly.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that was his plan to asset strip it. I mean, our game actual shop shut 3 years ago and merged with into Sports Direct. CEX, they keep going. Maybe that was his plan all along, just to sort of wind it down, move it into toys.
Maybe it was just to do with the property. But we're talking about 2019 again. I'm talking about 20 years ago. What they decided to do was keep their stores with a dwindling video game product range, increasing overheads, little reason to leave the house to buy a video game anymore, and then fill the shelves with toys and gift vouchers. Gift vouchers that you would use in online stores, that you would use in the PlayStation store or the Microsoft store. Would it be too harsh to say that all that remains of Game now is it's a place where grandparents go to buy little Johnny a gift voucher because he said he liked Minecraft?
Well, no, I think that's too generous, because
you can do that in Tesco.
Asda. You can do it in Asda. You can do it on Amazon. You can get it delivered to your house.
Yeah.
You can get a plastic card in the post from Amazon to hand someone at Christmas. If you're of the same mentality that I am, you need to physically hand something as a present, then you can get that way. I don't know what Game have other than what they could already have done in Sports Direct, which is order a few things in for a section. They've got gaming, the word gaming above. So it's a shame they let it go to that. But lots of stores like that have really struggled. They haven't got the planning in place. Argos are the only one that I can think of in the UK where ordering online is really good.
And they could have done better, even though they're doing it's good. It still feels like they were late to the party when they were ahead of the game.
Yeah.
But they've survived. But it's difficult for me to say Game is dead, and Game is dead because I've got a lot of happy memories of their stores buying Amiga games, seeing things like the 3DO blaster in the bargain bins, seeing the first PlayStation in the window, playing Panzer Dragoon on a Sega Saturn for the first time on a demo system there. Taking every opportunity I had to take the train there and come home with 2 or 3 games. I loved it. I've got great memories of that. So that makes me sad. Holly?
I think they've gone like HMV and Tower Records. They are going to be the memories we had, but they are no more.
Well, HMV have kind of found a way at the moment because of the surge of vinyl records. And the only future I can see for physical game retail is the kind of thing limited run games are doing, where they've got their own store, where they specialize in their own limited run products. But I can't see them opening many of them. I really think that's just a good marketing move to have one store to make a splash, to get some stories out there. We're not going to see a modern day chain of physical video game stores, I think. Maybe it's time for HMV to shine again with a combination of vinyl and limited run physical games. Used to go to HMV to buy video games. I remember buying some of LucasArts flight sims from HMV in London.
Yeah, and that's where games ended up. We talked about this when we talked about the Irish retro store. Games ended up being where you bought records and where you bought videos. They ended up all in the same place, which makes sense because it's a similar kind of product. So that is, as far as I'm concerned, I think that's Game finished. I don't think there's any doubt that there's no way back for them here. It's very sad what's happened, and it looks as if they've been run like Steptoe and Son, where they just haven't made any good decisions. They've been miserly and, that'll do for now.
Dirty
so
old
goodbye to
man.
Game, you dirty old man. 90% of people listening will have no idea what we're talking about. It's a sitcom that we were too old for back in the day. Dirty old man.
Harold!
Right.
Game over.
Time now for our community question of the week. And last week we were talking about Half-Life 2. I said that Half-Life 2 never got old for me. But what game never got old for you? What feels as fresh as the day you first played it, and why? So, Dave, are we out of competition mode?
Yes. We're
Yes,
now
we
out of
are.
competition mode. We've slammed the doors shut in competition mode.
Okay, so you can participate in this at reddit.com/r/This Week in Retro, where the question of the week is pinned every week. And the top answer this week comes from something that you might slyly do at work. Fantastic Rip 4961. It's Mario 64. I've played Odyssey, but it's not as good as the more basic graphics suit it better somehow. The gameplay, music, and feeling you get jumping around still feels as fresh or as good or better than modern platformers. I agree. Mario 64 with a proper controller, with a proper N64 controller, it just feels like the hardware and the game are made to be as one, because they were. It was the game that sold the platform, the N64. Great game.
Richard Shears says, I'm going to have to go with something slightly less retro, Skyrim. I still play it. I still find it fresh. I think the reason being that it was the accumulation of all that I wanted from the game, the gasp when looking at the beautiful scenery, the feeling of a limitless space with no artificial constraints, wondering where I would please and doing what I want when and where I wish. But also still being fun and not tied to reality. Yes, the game has faults and limits, but it was the first and up to now last game that I felt real excitement without any limitations being obvious and therefore crashing me back down to reality. And now that I've bored you with the obvious, I'll take an arrow to the knee and shut up. I lament Skyrim getting rid of its CRPG roots, the role-playing aspects of it, but it's an absolutely tremendous game.
Yeah. Holly, do you have the question of the week open?
I do indeed. I've got Lord Borak 316 at the next one.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Syndicate, I totally agree. He says, I do a full playthrough a couple of times a year. Still such a fun game and looks great. I try and come up with new ways to complete missions. And they've even added a homebrew RPG element.
Oh, nice. Nice, yes.
What was the sequel to Syndicate? Syndicate 2?
Syndicate Wars.
Syndicate Wars. That's the one I remember playing most.
That's where they went properly 3D, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was still isometric, I think.
Oh, there was one where they went full 3D. Yeah. We've got more answers from Reasonable Day 6252, Chucky Egg, one of the few games that the early 80s micros that I play where it still feels fresh to me. And here's my hot take, he says, the Dragon 32 version is the best.
For Chucky Egg.
Oh, hang on. And he says, and it's Ian Lee. This is my first ever post on Reddit. I really don't get it. Thank you,
Hello, Ian.
Yeah, anyway.
There you go. I think he's is he booked to be with us soon, Dave?
He might be. We don't usually say that ahead of time. He might be booked in.
He might be.
Might be coming.
If rumours are to be believed.
Yeah. Chucky Egg is great. It's a Spectrum game, but I always think it's a BBC game because I played it first at the BBC. It just seemed not so natural on it. It's a great game, though.
It's not good on the Spectrum. Well, it's not bad. It's just it feels right on the BBC.
Yeah. Spectrum game, though. Don't know how that works.
Yeah.
Any others stand out for you?
Yeah. It's Metroid says anything with vector graphics. It's an area of technology that we push to the side, and the closest things we have today is recreating it with lasers, Ollie. Seeing an asteroids cabinet in person is really quite something, especially with the extra bright beam that has pulsing across the screen now and then, something that would be impossible to replicate today. Lasers, Ollie. Tell us about lasers.
Well, first off, if you want to play the real thing, come down to the arcade. Come and play them. We have them. We have them there.
Tempest is fantastic.
Oh yeah, Tempest is great, isn't it?
Tempest is lovely.
Tempest is great. Is Tempest working, Holly?
Just over there.
So you've got Tempest, you've got Battlezone, you've got Star Wars.
And we have Asteroids Deluxe, which is fantastic. That's got the lovely Tetris Ghost effect. Yeah, it's gorgeous. And the sound's great. But as for lasers, myself and Rob Dev haven't given up. We had a meet-up about a month ago, a discussion about it. He wants to get his... Rob Smith?
I didn't know he was doing that, were you?
Yeah, it was his idea. I
didn't know it was him. I knew you were doing it. I didn't know it was him.
When I first went to the arcade on a patron day, meet up with Neil again after years, met Rob, and we got chatting, and we came up with that whole idea.
Amazing. So this is the Star Wars is a vector arcade game. It is absolutely wonderful. It's my favourite arcade game, and it's got these lovely... there's no resolution to them. You don't see jagged edges or anything on it. No. It's got that, so you could do it with lasers, and that would be absolutely phenomenal. So there you go. It's Metroid. You've hit on something interesting. It
was the sequel to Dizzy, wasn't it, Star Wars?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
It's got a yoke.
Oh no.
No!
The Twisted Sock has the best answer this week. He says Outrun, and anything that says Outrun is always correct. So thank you. Hybris from Indigo Prime. Doom from Rickalicious. Sid Meier's Pirates from SD Matt. Yeah, Pirates is great. All versions of Pirates.
You've got a pirate accent, Neil, if you get drunk.
I likes Pirates. Jacko6502 says Portal 2, getting on for 13 years now. Loads of great answers in there. So thank you everyone for participating. And that brings us on to our new question of the week this week, Dave, which is what?
How many Zendaya action figures do you buy in a month?
No, that's not the question this week.
Maybe it should be how many Stroudmen action figures would you buy in a month? Come on.
How many would you buy? Yeah.
No, the question this week is... Shall I just read it?
Sorry, I was looking at Syndicate War to try and find out if it's 3D. The question of the week is, what was the last thing you bought at a physical video store, and when was it?
Yeah, that'll get you thinking. Reddit.com/r/This Week in Retro to take part. If you love what we do and you'd like to support the show, head to patreon.com/This Week in Retro and become an official twirler. And thank you to everyone who does that. We've got a lovely community and a lovely swell of support behind us. So thank you. Really enjoy your support.
Some really nice comments being made, and it really does make our day when we read those.
And a big thank you to Holly for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Come and continue the conversation with Holly at the Arcade Archive. Book a ticket. Come and visit retrocollective.co.uk. And she is there pretty much every weekend, aren't you, Holly, working away?
I'll be there in about 3 hours.
Right, I'll see you there. Get the kettle on. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Take care. They're waving. Oh, what's Holly holding up? He's waving. She's waving.
Oh, Holly, well done. Bye-bye.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RNC The Cave and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Stiles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.